there, I'm Gabby and I'm a wet and wet oil painter, and this is part 2 of our series of how to paint canvas tents on your pictures. And this is going to be the wall tent. Now, between video 1 and video 3, you'll see a difference in the canvas because my recording got totally screwed up. So here we go again, even though you guys didn't see the original one. So here we have a wall tent. I'm going to bring you guys in nice and close so you can have a really good up-close view of this wall tent as we go through this process. Okay, now, wall tent. They call it a wall tent because they have sort of sidewalls. They are shaped very much like cabins, so if you ever decide to paint these, just sort of keep that in mind. And if you ever try to do one of these and you totally screw it up, you can just replace it with essentially a cabin. We are going to take our paints that we used, same sort of colors that we used in the first video. And if you haven't seen the first video, go back and watch that before you watch this, because there's a lot of stuff I'm just not going to talk about twice for time's sake. So the first thing we need to do is decide where the light's coming from. I decided that the light's going to come from this direction this time. So the front is sort of going to be shaded, and then the sides are going to be where the light hits. So the first colors that we use are the burnt umber mixed with ultramarine blue and mixed with a lot of paint thinner, so it's the point that it's liquidy. So it's to the point that it's liquidy. And we're going to fill this part in. So we'll get this all blocked in. I'm actually going to add a little bit more blue to it because I want to have a little bit more of a shade to it. And ultramarine blue is just a really good color, especially for shading. Okay, so there we have our first part blocked in. And then we're going to wipe that off. Okay, so that's our dark part. Then we'll take our brush that we're going to use for the lighter stuff, and we'll get that wet. And the first part that we're going to do is only going to have Indian yellow and a lot of paint thinner. And that's going to be to do the roof. So we'll go through and we'll fill this in. As we go through that, I'll tell you guys a little bit about these canvas tents. So they're made out of this treated 100% cotton, and it is usually made out of fire resistant canvas and mildew resistant, so they can handle, you know, stuff like sparks, and which is good because we have campfires near them all the time. And they repel water, which means that they don't get wet on the inside, which is good. All right, now I'm going to take that same color that I'm working with, and I'm going to add just a little bit of burnt sienna to it, just to darken it. And then we'll fill this part in. A lot of us have what we call smoke holes in our tent, so it will be like a hole in the ceiling with a flap that goes over it for when we're not using it. And then we can put wood stoves inside of our tent, and we can heat our tent. So if it's cold when we're at one of our reenactments, if we have a wood stove, we can light that wood stove and warm up our tents. And it's very efficient, and they warm very, very well. All right, so now we have the lighter stuff blocked in. I'm going to take a paper towel again. And I'm going to take off that color. And it's okay if we sort of color outside of the lines, because that stuff is going to get covered up by foreground and stuff when you go back and you finish. Okay, so now we have our underlay colors, and we're going to move on to putting white onto our canvas. Just give me 1 second, I'm wiping off my brush. Okay, so the white we're using is, first, we're going to use just straight white because the sun is really hitting the roof of this tent. We want it to look obviously lighter. And while I'm at this point, this is a good time to sort of cover up some of those pencil lines that I have. If you do any drawing with pencil to give yourself outlines and stuff on an oil painting, just make sure that you do it as lightly as possible so that you can sort of cover up those lines. Now the next thing I'm going to take is I'm going to take the white mixed with that unbleached titanium white, because I want to have just a little bit darker color along with it. And we'll fill in this. Now once we get that filled in, we're going to come from the top and we're going to go the whole way down. So you're going to go with the angle of the roof and then down. And the reason that I do this is because there isn't like eaves like on a house on canvas tents. Now if you make these canvas tents further away, they can be very, very simple. You don't need to put nearly as much detail in them. I made this one huge so that you guys could see it. I probably would never make one with this big of a tent in it in general. Okay, so now I'm going to take my dark brush again, and I'm going to grab some of that dark color that we used before with a thinner. And up here I'm going to put some sort of wrinkly things kind of going on in it that sort of swoop around, and that'll give it sort of this look of being saggy. And then I'm going to take white paint and I'm going to sort of plop it right above those little bits. So that it looks like there's light hitting them. I have another brush that I'm using that is just specifically for sort of going over stuff, so I'm not actually putting paint on it. Once we put in those swoops, we'll go back and forth and then up and down a couple times just to sort of bring it together. And I don't really like how light those things look, so I'm just going to blend them out a little bit. That's better. Good enough. It's just sort of to show you guys how to put some of that extra detail on there. Okay, so now back to our white with our unbleached titanium white. And again, you guys can just use, you know, you can make yourself an off-white. You don't have to have an unbleached titanium white to do this. I just like it. It's a really nice color. I use it for sand a lot, and I use it for my canvas. Just stuff that I want to have more of a natural look to it. So we'll come through and we'll fill that in. And then I'm going to take my dark brush. I'm going to get some more of that dark paint on it. And I don't want this stuff as thinned out as, you know, we had for when we were doing our wash. And then we'll put our door in. And then sort of make little swoopy motions away. If you go through this process too and you find that you just feel like it's too dark, you can definitely add some more light in there. Like so. I'm looking at this and I'm feeling like this is way more yellow than I want to have, and so I'm actually going to come back in here and I'm going to cover some more of that up. That's the fun thing about oil painting, is you can sort of fix stuff when it goes awry. There we go. And I'm just gonna lighten up that roof a little bit too while we're at it. All right, so there's our colors. So that's how you do the coloring. Now these tints have a little bit more stuff going on with them. And so we're going to take our dark brush and we're going to take some of that dark paint. Now when you do these in your picture, if you have a tent that's up closer, you're going to want to do details in the poles a lot like you would do on a tree. Just something to keep in mind. So they have poles on the sides. And then the main poles on the inside of the tent are the ridge pole and then the two supports that hold them up, so you don't see those. I'm going to show you something that they sometimes do with the sides of these tents. They'll have like a long side pole and then they'll have two supports, so the two supports here. But a lot of times that's not how people put them up. What they usually do is they have a number of side poles, and the number of side poles depends on how long the tent is. These tents can be anywhere from, say, 8 by 8 feet to, I've seen them be 16 feet by 24 feet. I've seen some huge tents. Okay, so those are our side poles, pretty simple. And then the last thing that we need for this is we need some ropes. So we'll make the ropes out of some of that dark color, but I'm going to bring some of the yellow into it too, because our ropes are usually kind of yellowish, and you can choose what color you want to make them. The corner poles have 2 ropes that come off of them at right angles. And then the other side poles just have 1 rope. Quite simple. And that is how you make a wall tent. And it's fairly simple. If you don't really know what these look like, just look up like Civil War wall tents, and it'll give you an idea of what they look like, you know, how to draw them. But they're basically the same shape as a cabin. If you ever do attempt to put one of these in your pictures again and it fails, just replace it with a cabin. Pretty simple. So that's it, guys. If you guys have any questions or comments, if you want to put it in the comment section of the video, I will happily address it. I'm Gabby. Thank you so very much for watching. And I really do hope that you fall in love with oil painting just as much as I have. Bye, guys.